Welcome to today's topic, which is Cymbalta. The top questions asked by our readers and our viewers. Number 1, why does Cymbalta make me anxious? Well, because Cymbalta is an SSNRI. In other words, it reuptakes serotonin and norepinephrine. Too much norepinephrine is the chemical equivalent of anxiety, and that's probably why. Everyone reacts different to this type of medication. However, if you are already anxious, it may not be the best medication for you. Of course, if you're watching this and you found it on the website, you probably know that we're not the biggest fans of medication, that we look for natural alternatives. But even from the orthodox viewpoint, if you're anxious, this medication could make you more anxious, If you're flatline depressed, and you are wanting to do a medication, this might be a better choice. But again, we do typically believe that a good diet, exercise, and being surrounded by good people is the place to start. And if that's still not working for you, that medications would be on down the line in your choice-making path rather than right at the beginning. All right, next question. Why do I have brain zaps even though I take my Cymbalta regularly? Well, I don't know how many people watching have seen the movie Scarface, but in the beginning, the cocaine got everybody high, and at the end, it just didn't work anymore. I mean, the point about getting shot and not feeling it, I don't know if that was probably theatrics, but we know that at some point, the drugs just stop working. And this drug is no different. It's not making norepinephrine. It's not making serotonin. It is spending what you have. And when you've spent it and you don't have any inhibitory control, what that means is you start having depolarization of neurons. Depolarization of neurons is called zapping. And that's what it's going to be when you don't have enough inhibitory control. The drug has spent it. And so there are other ways to build serotonin in your body, and we'll probably get to that in some of the next questions. Can stopping Cymbalta cause brain zaps? Yes. When a person's having brain zaps coming off an antidepressant, that generally means that they're going too fast. Now, there is something we do here that is very nuanced. It is not something we prescribe for people to do at home, but we bring the serotonin levels up. At the same time, we are bringing the serotonin drug down. We do that generally by feeding the nervous system tryptophan or 5-HTP. Tryptophan seems to be better tolerated for most people. We back it up with a little bit of niacin. And then as we're sliding a person off of an antidepressant that reuptakes serotonin, they generally don't get the brain zaps. Sometimes they do. Those people that the supplements do nothing for along that pathway or even make them feel worse generally have some sort of neurotoxic poisoning in that pathway, with the number one culprit being mercury. So if you have paradoxical reactions to tryptophan, 5-HTP, you're having constant type of anxiety and ruminating, and you're getting serious brain zaps anytime you try to come off this medication, then you might want to consider going and seeing how much mercury you might have in your nervous system by getting a chelation challenge test. You can get a chelation challenge test if you go up on the website called ACAM, which is the American College for the Advancement in Medicine, that's acam.org, and find a practitioner that will do a chelation challenge. But generally, the brain zaps mean to slow it down. They say that they're not damaging, but I don't have a lot of faith in they anyway. If my brain was short-circuiting like that, I would not put it past the physiology to be telling me that that's a problem and to try to stop it. Whenever I quit my antidepressants, I get brain zaps. What should I do? I think we covered that already. You slow down, try to take some tryptophan, and if that's not working, see if you've got a mercury burden. How can I get rid of brain zaps without medication? Well, the tryptophan and the 5-HTP and backing it up with about 100 milligrams of niacin could be your remedy. There are other things like glycine and theanine, and there's a whole branch of science called naturopathy that might be of assistance to you if you're looking for alternatives to medications, especially when coming off your medications, it's causing brain zaps. There are other ways to build up neurotransmitter levels besides spending them with these type of drugs. If brain zaps are the result of an SSRI withdrawal, then why do I experience them while taking my SSRI? Well, one is because the SSRIs can actually spend the serotonin, and when you're out of it, when you don't have something to inhibit, right? Basically what neurotransmitters do is they increase or decrease the likelihood that you are going to have depolarization of a nerve. That means one nerve talking to another. There's resistance between those nerves along the nerve axons. That resistance is similar to the resistance of the wiring in the wall. Like, you have to put more energy to it to overcome the resistance. So if you have a neurotransmitter that drops that membrane potential down so that you get nerve conduction, that is called an excitatory. If you have one that makes it less likely, that's called inhibitory. And when you've lost inhibitory control, you just have random firing along these nerve channels. So that means that you've bankrupted yourself out, and you need to build that back up naturally at a minimum. What is the difference between serotonin and norepinephrine? They are very, very bookend, okay? Serotonin is not an antidepressant. I mean, it can be if you're so anxious that it gets you out of anxiety to where you can actually start feeling normal, but it's not a mood elevator. It's an inhibitory neurochemical, and specifically what it tends to inhibit are ruminating thoughts, where you have a thought like, I'm going to die, or I'm going to jump off this cliff, or I'm not going to wake up tomorrow. It's that neurochemical that tells you it's going to be okay, it's going to be just fine, you don't have to kill some other person, you can figure out why they're different than you, or some sort of like a diplomacy neurochemical that inhibits the thought from going around and around and around and around. That's the normal balance. That's a normal teeter-totter that most people have. We all have impulsive thoughts, like we're going to do something, like maybe run our car into other cars, or jump off of a building when we're up on the top, or like choke somebody because they're making us mad. But most of us have the inhibitory control to cut that off. When you don't, it makes it very hard to do that. So when a person is saying that they are having ideation about that, they really may not be able to hold those sorts of things back. And that is what serotonin does. It gives you the ability to hold stuff like that back. And a drug sometimes can boost serotonin temporarily, at least, so that you have some measure of control over those impulses. Now, norepinephrine, on the other hand, is the antithesis of that. It's the one that say, hey, go ahead, jump off the cliff. You know, it's kind of the thing that pushes the anxiety sort of thoughts forward. So it's great for memory, it's great for learning, it helps you with your focus, but too much of it can be like, you have anxiety. So this particular drug, Cymbalta, raises both at the same time, hoping that somewhere in the stratosphere you will find some kind of a balance, and some people do. Some people do, and surprisingly, some people seem to be able to tolerate this long term. Of course, I'm a bit prejudiced. I don't see those people because they don't come saying, I'm having these cataclysmic problems, and that's all I see is cataclysmic problems, so I start to believe that's all that's out there. But realistically, we're talking 20,000 people I've talked to, and that's a lot of people having cataclysms to these type of medications. Why do some people have such bad reactions to Cymbalta? Well, the biggest reason why I think someone would have just based on the physiology is if somebody's anxious and you give them a medication that makes them more anxious, that's going to spin them out. And I see doctors doing the most ridiculous things. I'm like, where are you coming from with this? Like, somebody's on an antipsychotic And then they put them on a drug that's going to stimulate their norepinephrine as well. So you've got one that's basically holding back dopamine, and then you've got another one that's feeding it. It's why it's like trying to park the car in your garage by putting as much foot into the accelerator and the gas at the same time, hoping it lands somewhere between the wall and the edge of the concrete. Like, it really truly makes no sense. And if anyone understands the neurophysiology and the pharmacokinetics of these drugs, why would you give them both to someone who is having psychosis? That makes no sense. So a lot of times it's because of prescriber oversight, and other times it's because people tolerate things differently. Like, some people drink alcohol and they feel a little bit sedated, and they, have what you would consider to be the normal reaction. Other people get completely disinhibited and want to go on a killing spree. I mean, that happens with disinhibition. When you ramp up the serotonin in somebody, they could get disinhibited and do some crazy stuff that they don't even remember. I met a man one time at a conference that had killed his son. 15 years he spent in prison. And what surprised me is the patience and humor he could tell this story with, that he doesn't even remember what happened. He had never heard his son before. And I mean, he woke up in jail and didn't even know what happened. Could you imagine that? And the reason why he was out there talking to people is just to let people know that this kind of stuff happens. I mean, I can't even imagine the pain that this man went through, but that stuff does actually happen. Just because it doesn't happen to the most of people, it does happen to a percentage of the people that get disinhibited over these type of medications. Next question. Can you drink while taking Cymbalta? It's a free world. You can do whatever you want. Well, at least once you can. But if you are on Cymbalta, that is probably your body screaming at you that something's not right. And you might want to look at what you can do to fix that, so you can get off the Cymbalta and not add more complicating things to it, like drinking on top of it. If you do that, it is kind of stupid, but people in this society have a right to do stupid things. But are you going to die from drinking in Cymbalta? No, but you're removing your locus from the center of living even farther by going there. Why would you want to go there? Your mission would be, if you're on these type of things, you're having symptoms, to try to get to the root of those symptoms and figure out why you're feeling the way you're doing it, but the way you're feeling, and not add more complicating stuff to it so that you have the potential of feeling even worse. Get with a naturopath and try to figure out what's going on in your neurochemistry and your blood sugar or whatever in the first place, or a psychologist to talk to, and not add more confusing stuff to it, because it could turn out to be a complete and utter mess. And if you don't mind your life being a complete utter mess, then yes, you can drink with Cymbalta. Is Cymbalta better than Prozac? They're very different drugs. Now, I'll answer this from the allopathic, hat. Prozac is an SSRI. It's a lot easier to get off of than most antidepressants. It's the better tolerated antidepressants of all of them, because it's got such a long half-life, like 5-day or more long half-life. It's really how quick the medication leaves your system that has a lot to do with how bad the withdrawal is going to be. And some people, they get a day or two with the withdrawal and they're going crazy, and they say, of course, they're going to stop, right? You come off of something like Effexor or Cymbalta, it comes out of your system a lot faster, and the withdrawals are a lot more extreme. So from that perspective, Prozac, getting off of it's a lot better, but it's a different drug. Prozac is more geared for you to help sleep and to not be impulsive and not to hurt yourself or other people, where Cymbalta is more geared for helping you get up and go out in the world and make some mistakes like all the rest of us do and have enough energy to do it. So they're different drugs. I'm not a big fan of drugs, but Prozac is not the worst drug for most people, although I have seen people take a drug like that one time, and have complete anhedonia for years. Can't feel even the slightest emotion. You could go up and scream at them and they wouldn't even get angry at you. That's crazy, right? So oftentimes it's kind of like saying, is the pit bull biting you worse than the Doberman. I don't know. It depends on how old the Doberman is, I guess. They're both bad, right? How fast can I come off my Cymbalta? Well, it's weird. Some people can come right off this stuff. They've been on it a long time. They just come right off. And other people try to come off it, and it just, like the gates of hell open up, and things that they never even thought possible start happening in their life. So it is based upon the individual. But when you're tapering and you have a withdrawal manifestation, you wait until that withdrawal manifestation is over until you start the next one. So let's say you cut 10% or 20%. And you have an impulse control problems, or you're crying, or just whatever, wait until that stuff reintegrates. You had a couple good weeks of feeling okay, and you've restabilized before you go on to the next cut, because that is how you're geared. And however you're geared may be different than how someone else is geared, and you can't do necessarily what they do, because you have to listen to your own body and be your own judge, because ultimately, you are going to be the ones to live with the consequences of your decisions. Not your doctor, not your guide, not your therapist, you. They get to go home at night, and you have to go home with whatever the consequences are. So listen to yourself as a primary guide in your own healthcare, and use other people as guides, not gods. If I take tryptophan with Cymbalta, will I get serotonin syndrome? I have never seen serotonin syndrome in 15 years, and I'm sure it happens out there. There's literature to support it. It's my personal beliefs here. It's not necessarily the scientific community's belief, but I think serotonin syndrome, getting pinned on tryptophan, is like a case of mistaken identity. It's generally because people are taking 2 and 3 antidepressants. That's what's causing it. The tryptophan alone is not causing serotonin syndrome, okay? That's a naturally occurring substance that your body will use as much of it as it's supposed to use to make serotonin in the first place. Now, when you mix it with a drug that's a reuptake inhibitor for serotonin, could you get serotonin syndrome? Theoretically, yes. And it has happened to people. It apparently doesn't happen very often, because in 15 years of not seeing something that's being talked about out there, you'd think I'd have seen it at least once, and I haven't. I've seen people get put on antipsychotics for having blood sugar problems, or having, which started with the ADHD medication so many times that literally it sounds like the Jeopardy theme song to me. But I have never seen serotonin syndrome. But just to be safe, consider taking one or the other. Now, what we do here is not necessarily what you would do at home, but we will bridge in the tryptophan at the same time we're reducing the SSRI. So you're building up the natural aspects of your neurochemistry while you're going through the temporary depletion that you may incur coming off of the drug. It's the same thing with coming off of heroin. And a lot of people don't like that comparison about their medications they got prescribed at their practitioner's office, but the drugs are the drugs are the drugs. They're drugs. When a person comes off heroin, they get a temporary endorphin depletion that makes everything hurt. Their eyeballs hurt because of the weight of their eyelids. The water out of the shower hurts. Their digestion hurts because they don't have anything to keep the soft touch from feeling like sharp pain. They don't have any way to regulate sensation. And when people are coming off a serotonin drug, they don't have any way to regulate the serotonin pathway to sleep, to shut down their ruminating thoughts and all that. So what do you do in that case? Just like you do with a heroin person, we raise their endorphins by using endorphin precursors, and some people barely even feel that. We do the same thing getting people off SSRIs. We build up their serotonin at the same time they're sliding up. It's almost like jumping off a building and having one of those inflation bags, or like a, what do they call those things? The airbags in your car. Like you flying forward like this, and it's flying forward like that, and you meet in the middle, and you hardly even feel that you just came to a 60-mile-an-hour stop on a dime. It's the same principle. Otherwise, it can be a long, torturous path trying to build up your serotonin naturally, especially if you got poisons in there like mercury that are poisoning the body's ability to be able to make the serotonin in the first place. And if the serotonin drug worked for you, that was actually because you had some sort of relative deficiency, then you may have a physiology that does not make serotonin as well as other people. So when you're coming off the drug, you need even more support for that kind of thing. So if you're having a hard time getting off of a drug like Cymbalta, and it's because you're crying and having a lot of impulsive thoughts and ruminating thoughts that won't go away, maybe try getting with a naturopath and trying tryptophan. Do know that we are not your doctors. All of what we're telling you is not medical advice. It is pragmatic information that you would want to consult with a medical professional to see if it's right for you. You do not want to take medical advice from your television set. Even though sometimes it might be better than what's happening in your doctor's office, it still is not equivalent to having a personal relationship with you as a doctor would in a doctor-patient relationship. So please, this is not medical information. This is just information. Thank you.